Hi, everyone. Jane Applegath here, founder of the Epic Vision Zone, where we say it's your life, it's your story. Make it epic. Each show, we offer you an inspiring person or message to bring you closer to your big dreams so that you can live your epic life now. Thank you for being here. You can listen to the audio version on your favorite app or watch it on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Michelle Moros wrote, "Never forget your voice has the power to change the world." With more than 40 years of on-air and in-production experience, Susan Murphy is an expert in the field of broadcasting. Starting out as one of the nation's first radio traffic reporters in Philadelphia, she moved to Florida to be a television news reporter and a weather girl. At 25, she helped start the first traffic reporting service in New York and then became a radio talk show host, producer, and news director. She then transitioned into PBS producer and on-air personality, a colleague dean and instructor, voiceover artist, and now a broadcast voice coach. According to Susan, our voices are the most intimate tool we can utilize. It's a force to relay emotion, tell stories, bring audiences on a journey that words alone could not accomplish, and bring our personality into our craft. Though Susan's work has been fueled by her on-air work, her passion is in teaching others what she's learned, stating that there is something fulfilling about helping young talent find what she already knows lies within. She created VOSIT to coach clients as a broadcast voice coach, polishing the on-air sound of anchors, reporters, and podcasters around the country. Welcome, Susan. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
It is a delight to be here, Jane. And VOSAT, I always have to explain to people who aren't in the TV business. VOSAT is broadcast shorthand for voice over, sound on tape, which is why I named my company that. But since branching out into working with people in other professions, sometimes I have to explain what VOSAT is. And that's now you know.
Now I know. Yes, that's perfect. Absolutely. I had no idea.
Yeah,
of course, maybe it's changed now. Yeah, exactly. I love it. I love it. Well, so happy to have you here. I want to delve into this topic because I, like you, believe that our voices do carry a lot of power and influence and inspiration. So what turned on the light bulb for you to inspire you to do the work that you do today?
I had been a college professor back in the early 2000s, and it kind of happened accidentally, but it was a happy accident. And I enjoyed 11 years at Hofstra University and then at Stony Brook University on Long Island. And I loved being in a classroom. There is nothing like watching light bulbs, to use the same term, go off over people's heads when you can teach them something that really brings value to their lives in terms of being a broadcaster. So I didn't do that forever. And I had lived in New York for almost 30 years, moved to Charlotte 9 years ago. And 3 or 4 years ago, I was flipping channels and I'm looking at some news programs, local ones, and I'm thinking, here are these young reporters who can shoot a pretty good story, who ask the right questions, who look fabulous on camera. They're writing, okay, but their voices were not matching what I thought should be a more professional. Easy to figure out why. When I was coming up those many years ago in the mid 70s, first of all, you probably got some radio or on-air training in college because you probably worked at the college radio station. And then when you graduated, you didn't go to television. You always went to radio first. It was just unheard of to go straight to TV. So when you went to radio, there you learned a lot about your voice. And then you made the jump to TV. That was how that was done. That doesn't happen anymore. Very few radio stations, A, exist, or B, include newscasts anymore. So young people are going straight to television. But broadcast journalism has changed a lot since I learned it 40 years ago. And I'm so sorry to say that so much of it involves technology and not nearly enough involves journalistic principles, writing, and conveying a story properly. Can you edit? Do you know how to set up a light kit? Do you know how to set up this camera with a tripod? Because so many young journalists are now what are called MMJs, multimedia journalists. They don't go out with a
Mm.
photographer, they do everything. And so what suffers is their on air presence, I think. So I thought, maybe I could coach some reporters in voice. And I ran this idea past a news director friend of mine. He was in, I think, Iowa at the time. He sent me two of his reporters. He did not pay me, but he wrote me a glowing recommendation. I sort of hung out my shingle on LinkedIn, and the business grew. And I'm very happy to say that although I can always use more clients, word of mouth and some news directors who have taken advantage of what I can teach young journalists because they can't. Sometimes news directors will say, well, just slow down. Well, that's not really helpful. So I can do a little bit more than tell you to just slow down. And I have enjoyed this immensely. I have learned a lot doing it, and I'm going into my fourth year. So it has been a journey that is extremely rewarding. Extremely rewarding. That was the
Mm.
long answer.
No, I love that because you combined your passions for teaching and a profession that you knew all about. And I agree with you 100% that in the day, radio was the thing. It was even before television, mind you, that was before my day, but still, radio was a big deal when I was growing up, much more than the television was. We had not, I don't know, maybe 10, 5 channels, 10 channels. I have no idea. But yeah, and the art of expressing yourself and telling a story or a compelling report with just your voice it's an art. It definitely is an art, and I love this because this is something that the youth really need more than anything else. But we'll delve into that a little later on. But so thank you for sharing that story. And that being the case, what are 3 things then that a young person should know if they're considering a broadcasting or podcasting career?
Okay. Well, the first thing is don't get into it for the glamour, which a lot of particularly young women do. They think being on TV is glamorous. And boy, once you get there, you find out it really isn't. Not until you get into the higher markets and you have people doing things for you. So it's not glamorous. And don't get into it for the money. Sadly,
Mm.
and it's been a big topic of conversation around the industry, that salaries, they haven't even kept pace. They have fallen back when you adjust for inflation, where young people getting into their first jobs, moving away from home, having to live in a small market and make ends meet, making 13 to 15 to $17 an hour, that's
Mm.
not doable. And it has caused all kinds of problems, and we could talk about that, but that's not even fun. So let's not go there. So don't get into it for the money. And the third thing I think I would say, the more positive one is it can be an extremely fulfilling career. It can be amazing to tell people stories. It can be wonderful to be a part of a production of of a show or a broadcast. Whether you're behind the scenes or in front of the camera, it doesn't matter. There is great joy. And there are the people who work in our industry tend to be, for the most part, you get your occasional bad apple, but they are wonderful people who would just throw themselves in front of a train or die for you in a production, because everybody is watching out for everybody else. So
Mm.
it was a wonderful career for me, and it still can be. But go in with your eyes open.
Mm. I love that. Go in with your eyes open. And yes, I could see where it's such a collaborative. industry, very much like anything that takes a village or a team to put together, like filmmaking. Uh, and that's great because each person helps the other. Or, like you said, you get the support, you've got the, the energy around you to make everybody successful. And that's beautiful. I know I've worked on a film set before, and it's just like a big family, and
Yep.
it's creative as well. So, but thank you. I love that because you're right. Some people, young people considering it, might not have thought of the financial background or the financial aspects of it, and also that it's not all glamour, or it's not glamorous at all. It's really about being an influence and sharing what you have to offer. And I think that's the power, not only in our voices, but what we have to say when we're on air, whether that be television or radio. So,
They,
yes, those are wonderful tips. Go ahead.
they used to say that radio or television was a calling. And I've recently heard
Mm,
people do that as though, no, no, it's just a job that you might be good in. No, I think it is a calling. You have to want to shine those lights into dark corners. You want to go knock on that door of the family who just lost a 14-year-old to a drive-by shooting. You have to want to get out and cover the aftermath of a tornado, or to some degree put yourself in harm's way to cover certain stories. So maybe it is a calling. You have to really want to serve the greater good, serve the public
mm,
in bringing to light stories that affect your lives. And we're not just talking politics, we're talking health, we're talking education, we're talking what goes on in any community. It's still important for people to know about that, to experience it, and to know what their options are, and what's going on around them. And it's
right.
still true that most TV watchers are 50 and older, but TV has to figure out where they're going to get the next generation of viewers, and whether that is on different platforms, on TikTok. I don't know. I think after this election cycle, TV by 2025 is going to look very, very different.
Mm,
TV
that's
news, I should.
interesting. TV
Yeah.
news, right, right, yeah. Well, it does need some fixing. Let's put it that way, in very, very broad terms. But well,
Correct.
thank you. I agree 100%. And now, broadcast voice coaching. What is the most important thing that you have learned from broadcast voice coaching?
The most important thing I have learned is just not your voice. And what I generally
Mm,
help young people do is find their natural pitch, which generally sits lower in their body, kind of at the bottom of their diaphragm. But your voice isn't just something that's physical. It is also emotional, and it is how you tell that story in terms of writing. So there is a blend. It is a meshing of all kinds of things that go into how you tell that story. Now, the old journalism uh, adage that you can't be biased, you can't show your feelings, you can't get involved, you don't want to take sides, in some areas is still true. Hot button issues like abortion or gun control, and to some degree politics. But in almost any other story you do, oh yes, you're going to be involved. You are there to serve not only your viewer, but you are there to serve the people you're doing the story about, or the event you're covering, or whatever that is. So a reporter does have to be involved in some way, shape, or form, and how to do that properly is also what I can show reporters how to do as well. So there's more to it than just getting in front of a microphone. There's a lot that goes into broadcast voice coaching. And the first thing I teach anybody is breath work. We work on how to
mm,
breathe, how to go back to what I call efficient breathing. And that can be life changing just in the breath work that I teach young people, in terms of calming down, in terms of resisting fight or flight, in terms of getting their central nervous system to stop panicking. There's a lot that goes into this. And I didn't think there was quite as much as there is, but I've discovered things in my teaching as well.
Mm. Wonderful. Well, that is actually segues perfectly into our next question, which was to give us some insight into some of the work that you do when you collaborate with your clients. Now, you mentioned the breath work, which I wholeheartedly believe and agree with you. Is there a few other things that you can share with us that you do while you're collaborating with your clients to give us some insight?
Well, one thing I have learned and have always suspected is that voice is very personal. I think everybody's voice is about as identifying as their fingerprint, and everybody has a slightly different style, a slightly different way of speaking. So when you are dealing with someone's voice and you are trying to help young people not change it, not make it something it isn't, not inventing something, I help you find your natural, real voice. When we are children, boys and girls, we pretty much all sound the same, and we have vocal cords that are the size of a dime. Puberty comes along for boys, and their hormones change the size of their vocal cords to the size of a quarter. And hormones also lengthen it slightly. Their Adam's apple grows, and their voice deepens because of puberty. Girls don't have that happen in puberty at all. Nothing changes in our voices. Our vocal cords are still the size of a dime, which I always find so amazing, that the instrument with which we communicate to the world is the size of a dime. And so we have no change in our voice. And when you think about how children sound, there are high pitches and joyous this and that. And with a lot of girls, that continues into their, 10 and 11, 13, 14, maybe even through college, that high pitched or girly or breathy kind of thing that just continues does not mean that they are speaking in what is their natural tone, because it is lower. That higher pitched voice, from what I have learned for some women, is something that goes back to their childhood in terms of their relationships with men, in terms maybe of a dysfunctional family, in terms of bullying, in terms of being told to sit down and be quiet because I don't care what you think or say. So girls tend, I would say 15 to 20% of the women I work with had something like that happen to them growing up. So they are even more reticent to step into a lower, more beautiful, more authoritative, and more natural pitch. And when sometimes we have to talk about that in terms of what that was like growing up, and that first I give them permission to move into this new voice, and then encourage themselves to give themselves permission to move into this voice, which can be a huge change, not just on the air, but many women choose to use that voice, employ their natural pitch all the time. It takes a lot of practice, but it can be done, and it's life changing. And to
Mm.
walk with those women on that journey into a bolder, more beautiful, um, natural and authoritative, those are the words that always come to mind, pitch, it's where confidence blossoms. It's where it blooms. And I'm honored to watch and be there.
Mm. Susan, that was absolutely beautiful. Yes,
You must
absolutely.
do that.
Pardon?
I mean, you're a creative coach. You work with women to empower them and to dig deep to find their dreams, embolden them to move forward. It's what I do too. It's just on a on a much smaller level. But I'm curious, have you been able to equate voice and moving forward as something that should happen together?
Oh, yes, absolutely. In fact, I think we had an earlier conversation about this, about women and their voices and how they tend to be not only maybe a higher pitch, but very meek. And even though they have incredible knowledge, they're extremely successful and accomplished women. And yet you get them on camera and their voices are very like restrained and soft, and I want to reach across the camera and say, speak up because you're powerful. But yes, absolutely. And I agree with you that that's finding that. And once you find that voice, once you're rooted in expressing your authentic self, which is what that is giving yourself permission to express your authentic self. That's when the confidence, that's when the empowerment, that's when the strength and the courage comes bubbling up, because then
Yep.
you actually feel yourself moving into another person, which is actually the person you are meant to be. Yeah.
Yes,
It's
yes, yes. I often
yes.
say that
Yeah.
if your eyes are the windows to your soul, your mouth, your voice is the front door. And whether it's
Mm.
fair or not, people are going to judge you by how you speak. And that's why, those certain accents are looked down upon in certain areas of the country or the world, and certain pitches and how quickly you speak or how slowly or how stentorially you speak. But there's no reason why you can't be your best in terms of your vocal power. And that's what I help young people do, is to harness the power that they already have. Most of them just don't know it. So I show them how to breathe. We work on putting, when you write sentences, don't make them so long so that you run out of breath. And by the time you get to the end of that sentence, you have no idea what you said when you started. So there are all kinds of tricks and tips that I can teach and strategies that I can teach broadcasters, but I can teach ministers. I have worked with nurses. I have worked with CFOs, people who just want to sound better in their places of work, whether it's the pulpit or the boardroom. And I'm amazed that to me it seems so simple, but for an awful lot of people, it is not. And sometimes it's fear. You have to get past, well, what's the worst thing that could happen, really? When you go to speak in front of a group, even if it's just a mom who has to stand up at a PTA meeting or whatever. So there are just so many things that I can do to make you a stronger, more valuable employee. You can share things more easily. How many times have I asked a young reporter, okay, so in your morning editorial meeting, where do you stand? Well, I go to the far corner and I just kind of stand there like this. Oh, do you? Okay, here's what we're doing tomorrow. You're going to walk into that editorial meeting and you are going to stand next to the news director, and you are not going to go to that back corner, and you are going to root the weight of your body, down through that floor. You're going to drop those shoulders. You're going to breathe into that belly, and you are going to make your pitch for your story to cover that day. And you're going to make it in a bright and fun and educational way, that yes, we need to cover this story, and I've already done X, Y, and Z, and this is why we need to do it. And they're going to say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Preparation. Oh my gosh. I'm a stickler for that because I have been a television producer. And so preparation is, and the world we're in, Susan, a lot of people feel that the more organic it is, the maybe you're speaking to a certain clientele or a certain audience, but preparation really does even help organize your thoughts. Even if you
Oh,
don't actually verbatim read what you've written, it just helps organize your thoughts, because let's face it, we sometimes we get excited, or we're nervous, or we've had a bad night's sleep, and
right.
we're just not on the ball. But articulation is so important. It really is. And that is about getting your thoughts together and expressing what it is that you really want to say, and in a short actually period of time usually. So yes, I agree 100%. And thank you for that incredible insight. Well, that being the case, then here's a question. The podcasting industry is grown to 25 billion since its inception in 2004, and getting stronger. In fact, I've heard that the podcasting is the future. So how do we stand out amongst the many in an industry that has so many participants?
So glad you asked that question. My first love will always be radio. And I do think that podcasting is just the next reinvention of radio. It's almost the same thing, but on a different platform. And you are not bound by area, and you are not bound by government regulations with regard to what you can and cannot say. Podcasting can be so useful for the entire world. I mean, it's just like what they thought radio was going to be back in the mid and late 20s, when they thought, oh, we are just going to bring music and culture and education and politics to everybody around the United States, and we're all going to be connected by radio. And they thought that was wonderful. You know, they said the same thing about the internet, and the same thing happened to both of them, in that instead of bringing people together, all that information or all that sound or all that accent or whatever divided people, which was kind of sad. But I'd like to think maybe we've learned something from the 1920s through the early 2000s, in that podcasting, it can be, one of the things about podcasting is it's very narrow. It appeals to a particular audience. You can, you can do true crime. There are so many minute little things that you can do in podcasting, but it's there for people to find, and it's there for people to learn from. And I think those of us who are in podcasting owe it to our audience, as you said just a minute ago, to be extremely prepared, to bring the best out in ourselves and in our guests, learn how to interview, and before you even do that, learn how to listen. Listening skills, very important in podcasting. And I think some podcasts are kind of a free-for-all, and those kind of podcasts I don't care for. When there's too much crosstalk that goes back and forth over each other, that's distracting. So I think you have to learn some of the rules in terms of what that sounds like, and just be the best you can be for your audience and the people in the room with you. And I think podcasting is brilliant. The problem with it, of course, is monetizing it. The problem, of course, is advertising it. But I guess that's what the web is for, in terms of finding that podcast. But in terms of how you monetize it, that is still the holy grail of questions in the podcast industry. But it does come with responsibility. You don't just, anybody can do a podcast and put it up on a platform. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Take time, research it, think about your audience. Anytime you're teaching tips on public speaking, you always remind that person that it's really not about you, it's about your audience. What does your audience need to learn? How would they like to learn it? What are the best ways of bringing the points across? That's what I think makes a successful podcast.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. So great. Those tips are wonderful. And you're absolutely right. Listening is an art because often I've been told when I do interviews, I listen and I actually respond to what they've said as opposed to, well, now that's the next question, like as if they've said
Mhm.
nothing and nothing is profound or interesting. It's just, let's answer
Mhm.
these questions. And
Yep.
of course I could see that that often happens in the news, because they have a very short period of time and they have a schedule to go through. But when you're informing individuals like this particular platform loves to do, and inspire individuals and provide them with resources and knowledge so that they can grow, you want to have some sort of an interaction that says, yes, this might be something that an individual would love more information on, or that turned on the light bulb, or what a great tip. So absolutely. And preparation. Now I know we've spoken a little bit about this, but to be a successful in the broadcasting or podcasting industry, what value do we give? Now, preparation, we said we give a lot of value to, but as opposed to winging it. Now, for example, I'll give you an idea of what I do to prepare, and then maybe you can give us an idea of where you stand. I always write a script. And that's just my background. I've always been one to prepare. In fact, most individuals who I interview, they always are very pleasantly surprised that I send them a script, because they said they've never
Mhm.
had anyone send them a script. And it's not that they have to use it or even look at it, but it's preparation on my part. And then what I also do, Susan, is I practice the introduction before I go on air. I go through it once or twice so that I at least have my vocal cords are warmed up. I've got an idea of where the script is going, and and I actually, before I finalize it, I read it out loud to see if I have too many long sentences, to see if it makes sense before I finalize it and say yes. So I read it out loud to hear what it sounds like, because when you write something versus when you speak it, it's very different.
Mhm.
So give us
Mhm.
some idea. I mean, those are some of the things that I do, but I'm sure there's some inside secrets that you've done as well.
All of what you said is perfect and great. TV reporters, anchors, sometimes they can be scripted and other times they have to be live and they have to ad lib. So they have to go back and forth. So, with regard to script writing, I'm very famous for saying I kind of invented this when I taught, and I would say to my broadcast performance class, I want you to write it like a fifth grader. I want you to deliver it like a college professor. In other words, you need to make your script universally understood by whoever is listening. And I want you to deliver it in a way like a favorite college professor who has been teaching that course forever, who knows it like the back of his or her hand, but they can do it with stories, they can do it with inflection, intonation, pauses, the
Mm.
right words to bring that to life. So, what a lot of young broadcasters can't seem to deal with right away, because when you think about high school and getting into college and the papers that you write in college, they are all long winded. You
Mm.
use your very fancy high school words. You think that the longer the sentence, the smarter you sound. Not true. I think it was Albert Einstein, or at least it's attributed to him, who said, if you can't take a complex situation or a complex thought or a complex idea and make it simple, you don't understand the situation, the idea,
Mm.
whatever. So a reporter has to be able to take a lot of facts and break it down into what a viewer needs to know right now. So you have to, this is important, this is not important. And that's a very important job. We are gatekeepers, as they used to call us, of information. So you have to, the who, what, when, where, why, how. Yeah, that's basic journalism. But then why does my viewer care? How does it affect them? Why should they be paying attention to this? There's a lot that goes into that preparation to put out information because you can't do it all. Newspaper writers can, TV broadcasters can't,
Mhm.
radio reporters have it even worse. And that's the first thing you have to make peace with. I'm not going to be able to tell you everything. You can go to our
Yeah.
website for more information. You make peace with the fact that you're just going to get the basics out of the story, at least the first go round of it. So that's a big job to learn how to edit. And that's true really for
Yes.
anyone, a CEO who's about to do, a monthly earnings call. I did work once with a man in San Francisco who did that kind of thing, monthly earnings calls. And he said, God, they were boring. What can I do to make them better? And the first thing I said was, well, you can make your sentences shorter and don't read it just going through it line for line. Put in pauses, read it like you mean it, write it as if you were telling someone so that not only the investors can understand it, but how about your grandmother? You think you could make her understand it too? And he was really quite amazed by that it was actually that simple, but it is.
Simple, but not easy.
Right. Simple, but not
Yes,
easy. Correct.
absolutely. Because we always get caught up in our routine, the what we know, and to change that. And I, like you, believe that making things more simplistic is actually an art because it is
Mm-hmm.
very difficult to take a lot of information and condense it, but it can be done. And of course, now we have the advent of our helpers in AI who are brilliant at doing that. Oh, look at Susan. But they will help
Yes.
condense it. And yeah, well, that's an interesting question. So how I could see that that triggered something in you. So how do you feel about AI and the part that it may or may not assist us?
Well, actually, how I feel about it doesn't matter because we've raced past that. It's going to be part of our lives, but I greatly fear that, garbage in, garbage out. AI can only
Oh,
be trained by the information that is out there. And there's a lot of disinformation and misinformation. AI doesn't really know the difference, I don't think, sometimes. And I fear for how it will present, could be anything from heart surgery to, how to bake a cake. And I often say to my reporters, I say, the only thing that stands between you and me and artificial intelligence is our heartbeat.
mm,
Artificial intelligence will never have that. So, a reporter's involvement, if you want to do the research and you want to use AI to scope down or edit complex information, just make sure. And I don't know how you could double check it if AI is telling you it's true. That's my concern. But
mm.
just don't use AI all the time. It, it's missing a heartbeat. And what goes on in the world has a lot to do with heartbeat. And we forget that, whether we're covering war or government spending, there are still people involved. And AI can easily take that out of the equation, and it scares me to death.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with you. Garbage in, garbage out. So it really is, you have to put the knowledge and the resources that you want to express first before it does. I wasn't actually, when I said that can help you, I was exactly what you said. You want to have what you want to say in you've done the research, you've put your own words into it, and then let it condense it for you. I mean, that in that regard, it's
Yeah.
very useful. But yes, absolutely, I agree 100%. And it is here to stay. And you're right. We do have. I often say the humanness is all ours. It's there to assist, not to produce everything. So yes, and I do love what you said, that we are the gatekeepers of the information. And that goes with AI too. It's not just what we're delivering, but it's also, you know, I want to get into this. This is actually the next question. You mentioned about your pitch and, you know, how you deliver it, the gentleman who was delivering those calls every week. And it really, it's a lot about the energy. I mean, are you there? Are you not? Are you just reading words off a piece of paper and it's monotone and everybody in the room is just falling asleep? Or are you engaged? So what do you mean when you say the perfect pitch? And what are some of the simple tips that you find that that perfect a pitch?
And I will certainly get to those, the part of the education that I love to spread around the world, because it's actually very simple, some of the strategies I can give you. But I want to go back to what you said with regard to uh, being there, being energized in your presentation. If you were to ask any of the great TED Talk speakers in the world, what's the most important thing about delivering a TED Talk? They would tell you passion. So if you don't have great passion for what you're talking about, it's going to take you down a few notches, which is why people who do TED Talks feel very passionate about what they're talking about. In terms of giving an earnings report over a phone to investors on the other end once a month, once a week, yeah, that can get kind of boring. So whatever you can do to give it a little life or a little kick. And, you know, even I think in an earnings report, you can always find a story.
Mm-hmm.
Storytelling is important in all kinds of forms of communication, and that could be one of them. And certainly that's what news people do. We tell stories. So learning to bring the right emotion, the right words, and the right feeling to a story is, you know, what I help reporters do, so that they don't sound monotone. You know, they go out, they work all day on a story, they come back, they write a script, and then they go into a booth and they record it, and then the video gets put on top of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're hours away from where that story was. So I say to them, when you get into that booth, think back to the people you talked with. What were they talking about? What was their attitude? What was their level of emotion? What did you see? What did you smell? What did you hear? What did you feel? Go back and put that in your head, and then record that story so that you can make it sound almost like you're recording from where you were during the story. So that's one way to put energy into, you know, a TV report. But in terms of
Yes.
finding your best, it's really actually pretty easy. Um, I can take an hour to teach you with all the bells and whistles, or I can do it in 7 words. Should we do the 7 words?
That's
Drop your shoulders, breathe into your belly. Drop your shoulders, breathe into your belly. I was taking singing lessons about 25 years ago. I had done regional theater on Long Island and was cast in a show where I was going to sing a duet with another woman. I had never done that in my whole entire life. Put me in the chorus, but a duet? Okay. So I found a voice teacher, and there were all kinds of posture things that I learned about singing, which translate beautifully to speaking. And the most amazing thing I ever learned was the tip to drop your shoulders. You have to let go of the muscle tension across the top of your chest, across the top of your back. Several reasons. It automatically loosens the muscles into your neck, your jaw, and your face. And when I was going to sing that duet, or if you're going to go speak in front of that audience, or you have a presentation at school in front of the class, and you're nervous and you're scared and you're anxious and you're tense, where do you carry it? Your shoulders. And most of us go through our lives with tense shoulders. And just by tensing your shoulders, which you really can't only tense your shoulders, it tenses all the muscles around your rib cage. It forces the pitch of your voice up. It also doesn't allow you to breathe, as I say, efficiently. Most of us do what's called conversational or clavicular breathing. It's short, shallow breaths, gets the job done, but it's not efficient. All babies are born breathing into their bellies. They don't know how to do otherwise. When they learn to walk and talk, that's when they start doing clavicular breathing. When we sleep, return to breathing into our bellies. But during the day, a lot of us don't think about it. So if you can drop your shoulders and breathe into your belly, it relaxes so many muscles, and you are very aware, or you can be very aware, of air and energy rising from the bottom of your diaphragm, comes up past your vocal cords, makes a sharp turn, and then out the mask of your face. And by putting just a little power, I call it boldness, behind it, you'll be speaking in your natural pitch. And it automatically changes the pacing of how you speak. So many people become a runaway train when giving a speech. And then if you were to say to me at the end of the speech, okay, well, what did Jane talk about? And I'd go, I'm not sure. So changing the pace of your speech, allowing pauses, I call it being intentional and deliberate in your storytelling, allowing people to catch up with what you just said, particularly if you're speaking about something that might be new to your audience. I say to newscasters, you've worked on this all day. You know this story backwards and forwards, but for the viewer, it's the first time I'm hearing about it. So I don't know all the details yet. Be intentional and deliberate so I can follow along, so I don't get lost. So
Right.
dropping your shoulders,
Yes.
breathing your belly is the key to beautiful speech.
Again, simple but not easy, because you have to be very conscious of the
Mm-hmm.
shoulders and the belly, because we often do, even, unfortunately it happens naturally that we carry all the stress, or we're thinking and we carry it in our shoulders. So, but thank you for that. Oh my gosh, just keep it in your mind. Drop your shoulders, breathe from your belly. Drop your shoulders, breathe from your belly. Just have it on
Yep.
repeat and
Seven
go
words.
through your
That's right.
day. Uh, yeah,
Right. Just have it on
exactly.
repeat.
Exactly. Absolutely. They say that that's the key to you learning a new skill, is just keep repeating it, but repeating it in a good way. So you did mention a little bit here about the power of the pause, and why that's so important in any conversation. You said that it helps people catch up or absorb what you are uh, providing them with the information. Is there another reason why pause is so important?
What I explained to you was why it's important to the listener. Why is it important to the
Mm,
speaker? Well, when you're taking a pause, first of all, a pause can cover the or the when you get to a part of a speech. If you're speaking extemporaneously and your mind just hasn't caught up with what you want to say next, that's where ums and uhs drop in. If you can learn to just make that a pause, It allows your brain to move ahead so that you can pick up
Mm.
what you were about to say. So if you are given to ums and uhs, again, easy to talk about, but not easy to implement, just take that pause, gather your thoughts quickly, and move on. Your, your listeners aren't going to know, and they're actually going to appreciate the fact that they're not being drummed at, with a whole lot of words in that talk or speech or presentation that you're giving. It also allows you, the speaker, to drop your shoulders, and I call it resetting the pitch. So that if you are excited, and as I said, passion is the number one thing you should have in the topic of what you're talking about. So chances are your voice will fly away. It will get excited and reach in a little bit into the stratosphere. If you take a pause, you can drop your shoulders and bring that pitch right down. You can still be excited in that lower pitch. You don't have to make your voice rise just to show you're excited. No, that doesn't have to happen. So that's what pauses do for the speaker and for the listener.
Mm. Yes, so important. It actually, I think, also makes the audience pay attention. Because if you're going on like a train, like you said, they're like, oh, yeah, it sounds like a bunch of words mushed together. But then when you pause, they go, oh, what's happening now? Because there's no noise coming out of that person.
That's what I call the long pause. Let's say you kind of
Ah,
noticed your audience is drifting off, they're looking at their phones, they're looking around. What you do is, and if you can come out in front of the podium, that's even better. You take that long pause, and then people go, oh, she stopped talking. Yes. So you can use that sort of as a last resort to wake everybody up.
yeah, absolutely. These are brilliant. Thank you, Susan, for that. Well, you have said a little bit here about women, but the benefits to women finding their voice from a voice coach perspective. What else does it help women besides gain their confidence? I've got here self-discovery, connections. It's so rich when women learn from a voice coach such as you how to express themselves, but how to own their voice. Give us just a little bit more insight into that.
Thank you. That's a wonderful thing to point out because so much comes from this. The reaction that these young women have who are now speaking from a natural pitch, who are speaking up, who are speaking boldly, it's not just what they're doing, it's what they're getting back.
Mm.
Suddenly, people are paying attention. Suddenly, people are asking their opinion. Suddenly, you've brought the room to a quiet stop with your speech or whatever. So it's what they can get back that nurtures them in a way I am telling you they were not nurtured as children or young adults.
Mm.
These are the women who were told, and it's very often a generational or a cultural thing. The older brother gets all the attention. The little kids in the family get all the attention. And the girls, particularly if you're in the middle, yeah, whatever. I don't have time for that right now. No. I really don't care about what you're thinking about that. Um, so if a woman can step forward using a more powerful voice, I bet even their dads are thinking, whoa, I've never heard her speak like that. Yeah, you know why? Because you never
Mm.
gave her the chance. But that's another story. So women can come into their own not only to give out their opinion, their knowledge, their story, their emotion, but to take in as well. And I think it's also very important in all personal relationships. We're talking about the pause. If we used more pauses in the conversations we have with our children and with our significant others, and we were less likely to fly off the handle and say things we would regret or would have to apologize for later. If we take more pauses, maybe those conversations could be more useful. And
Mhm.
I think that too, if so that you're not just talking to talk, you're talking to be heard, and you are heard. And
Mm.
that's also the important part about and women who, let's say in a boardroom, you have the woman who is learning to speak up, speak out, but you always have two others who are just a little meeker, a little shyer, not nearly as confident. If they can see it in another woman, well, maybe I can do that too. So it's the
Yeah.
example you set. And you never know who you're setting that example for. You might not know who that shy person in the room is, or on Zoom, or in the back of the auditorium.
Yes, absolutely. The influence. You become an influence. Yeah. And people, because you have that, you're exuding the energy and the boldness or whatever it might be, and then you're communicating it to others. People will sense that, and you can be the inspiration for sure. Like you said, you never know, or you never know what kind of day they're having. And that's just what they needed to hear. So, absolutely. Well, thank you for that. That is so insightful. And yes, it is a self discovery to understand and to learn about the power of your voice and the message that we all have. We all have messages from experiences, from the gifts that we've been given. And that's so important to share with the world. And like you said, it's the doorway. Well, if there was one message, Susan, that you could share with the world, what would it be?
Speak up and take chances. We didn't get to talk about some of the things in my career where I was all about kind of like voice coaching. I was always about finding the need or the hole or the absence of something and then trying to give it life. So that's what I did a couple of times in my career. And I took some big leaps of faith, and they pretty much all turned out okay. Not, there were certain instances in my personal life that it didn't turn out quite so okay, but um, in your professional life, speak up and take the chances.
Speak up and take the chances. Well, you may have answered our next question, because I said, if this is our one last question, because we're here on the Epic Vision Zone, and it is, if your life were an epic story, what would the title be?
I am so glad you gave me a heads up on that because it took me the better part of half an hour to come up with it. And I think I would call it Behind That Pretty Voice, dot, 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 dot.
Yes, I could see that. That would be something I would be very curious to open. Yeah, because you're inviting people to find out what is behind that pretty voice.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, again, thank you, Susan, for joining us here today. And once again, for information and to connect with Susan, go to the Epic Vision Zone bio pages, where you will find all of her social media and direct contact information. And be sure to follow me on Instagram at Jane Applegath. And don't forget to connect with me at janeapplegath.com, where you can access your free downloads, Creative Power, and Vision Play Sheet. Sending you so much love and gratitude. This is the Epic Vision Zone, transforming your dreams into epic success.